When you get the tip, you have to walk all the way to Brazil to drop your skull. And the New York Times ran the story like that, you know, thinking, and they even changed the name. When they found this Negroid woman, they call her Louisa, because the first human we found on earth is Lucy, an African. So they call her Louisa. But when it got to the New York Times, they call her Valherbe or Malherbe or something like that. And she comes from Asia. Niggers don't come from Africa anymore. They come from Asia. You find them in the wrong time, in the wrong place. Jesus Christ, I mean, how far can you take this nonsense? It is absurd. And you find also skeletal evidence. Listen to this, because I have to be very careful here.
Hey, listen first, before watching the video. Which people discovered America? Tell me in the comment section. Probably, I know you'll tell me that it is the Asians or the Indians who discovered Africa, or they were the true indigenous of Africa, right? That's what we've always been told, right? And that's what we always know, right? But what if I told you that it is Africans who discovered America? Africans were there even before the Indians were in America. Yes, so I want you to watch this video. It is a little bit longer video. I want you to pay attention to what this professor says, because it is an important message that we Africans, or people, colored people, we have always been told. And the professor says it so clearly that people who live in a place are not the people who discovered the place. For instance, if you ask an American, is this America? You're American? Yes, they tell you that I'm an American, but they are not the true indigenous of America. So let's watch this video and then come back, say something at the end of it.
I remember when I entered the chamber, this gentleman, head of the Queen's Centenary Commission, came up to me and said, "You don't mean to say you come here to say Columbus did not discover America?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You must be mad." I said, "You look mad to me too." As a result of my presentation, Congress decided to delete the word discovery from official documents. I presented a vast body of evidence, and it started as a peculiar accident because I was in the British Information, I was in Services, then I was in the British Information Services, and never intended to come to America. I'd heard such dark things about America, but I'd heard dark things about most countries. Anyway, I was on my way back. My Prime Minister had invited me to read poetry at the occasion of the independence of our country, independence celebrations, because I was known then as a poet. And I was on my way back, and Jan Carew, a famous Guyanese author, invited me to come to America, and I said, no, I'll never go to America. I've heard such dark things about America. No. He said, don't be foolish. There are dark things about all places in the world. You come and check it out. So I came there on a Saturday. Sunday morning he was asleep when I came down into his library, and I saw 3 green books, Africa and the Discovery of America, by Leo Wiener. This was done, I think, in the 1920s. The problem with Leo Wiener, however, he was strictly a linguist. And I felt that finding a number of African words in America would not be enough to prove the point. To prove something like that, which would overturn a great amount of thinking, would call for a vast body of evidence in many fields. So I actually began a critique of this. 30 years ago, I actually began to attack my own subject. I didn't know it would become my subject, because it wasn't good enough. Linguistics, I was trained as a linguist, and I know that you could occasionally get a number of words. You'd have to prove a lot of things. You would have to have evidence in many fields to prove something like this. So I sent it to the editor, and I said, if anyone could show me just a few sculptures or portraits of Africans in America before Columbus, I would take another hard look at this matter, because he presented no pictorial proof, and he knew nothing about skeletal material, so he couldn't provide skeletal proof. And the editor at Random House, Charles Harris, called me up and said, "Van Sertima, something strange has happened on my table. You ended your piece by saying if anyone could show me images of Africans in America before Columbus, I would take another hard look at this matter." And I turned the page, and I turned the page, and I turned the page. There were 7 images of Africans. John Williams, the novelist, author of The Man Who Cried I Am, had been to Mexico and met a strange German, last of the Royal House of Germany. Hitler had put him in charge of the German embassy in D.C., and something happened, and he was dismissed. I was later to find out why he was dismissed by Hitler, because Hitler sent around a circular saying that everyone in the diplomatic service has to sign a statement saying they're a pure Aryan. And von Wutenow wrote back. Now, he was a count, the last of the royal house in Germany. This was strange for von Wutenow, strange for anybody in that position. Wrote back to say, there is no such thing as a pure Aryan. All people have black blood. Oh God, he had to flee after that, because Hitler would have gotten him. So I rushed off to Mexico to meet this strange man, and I went to his chateau. And he'd heard about me because I had written him first and told him what I had done. And we sat in that place, okay? We sat on his steps half the night arguing, because he couldn't. You have to show me a hell of a lot of evidence to convince me of something that everybody believes is true history. And he says, I said, I have to see these heads. He said, I have a few in my study. I said, that's not good enough. I have to be sure that they are valid, that you are now making this up. He was a little annoyed by that. He wanted to throw me out of the house. But nonetheless, I persisted. You have to prove this to me. I need to see sculptures of these people. And he says, they're not in the big museums. They don't take chances like that in the big museums. You have to go to private collections. And the next day he started to take me to private collections, and I was utterly stunned. You would be surprised how much history is hidden in private museums. They don't allow these things in the big places. It's just like in Egypt. I am responsible for returning to the modern Egyptians the splinters of the Sphinx's nose and chin which Napoleon's army blew off. A friend of mine, Garland Roberts, an adventurer, he was in England. He went into the British Museum, and he found that they had the splinters of the Sphinx's nose and chin. How he did that, but he's a fellow, he's a daredevil. He would risk his life just to prove a point. And I says, you go back there. I'm going to pay your way to Britain. You go back and photograph the damn thing. Pretend you are a, messenger boy, whatever it is, get a job there, get the damn thing. And he brought back startling pictures. And I called Sheikh Anta Diop, head of the radiocarbon laboratory in Dakar. He's dead now. He was the leading African scientist. And I got in touch with him, and I told him what had happened. And I got in touch with Gamal Abdel Mokhtar, the Arab delegate at UNESCO. Sheikh Anta was at UNESCO too. And I got in touch with, I told Garland Roberts, he has to be on the phone, and we started a conversation with the British Museum. And I started out by saying, sir, we understand and we have hard visual proof that you have the splinters of the Sphinx's nose and chin in your museum. And I have the Arab delegate at UNESCO here and the African delegate, etc. And we'd like to negotiate the return of the splinters of the Sphinx's nose and chin to the Egyptians. Now, Keiko. Now, Van Sertima, we can't do that. See, most of the things we have in our museums come from all over the world. If we started returning things to this and that country, we'll have no museums. I said, sir, we're not asking you to destroy the museum. This is a specific object. This is a matter of the very gravest importance. I have on the line with me Gamal Abdel Mokhtar, the Arab delegate, Sheikh Anthony Diop, the African delegate, myself, Garland Roberts, who has proof that they were the pieces, it's me, he photographed them. And he said, well, we will consider it. Do you know? Sheikh Anta spoke, I had a French translator. Sheikh Anta spoke, I spoke, Garland Roberts spoke. Do you know the Arab delegate? We're returning it to the bloody Arabs, you know. He never said a bloody word. Because the Arabs are not Egyptian. Don't make any mistake about that. It's just like we're in this room here. This is America. It would be hard to find a Native American in this room. The world has changed dramatically. There have been half a dozen invasions of Egypt, the Persians, the Greeks, the Syrians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Arabs. That is not Egypt. Egypt is no longer Egyptian. They have not a damn thing to do with the building of the pyramids. We now have hard proof, very hard proof, that Egypt was African when the pyramids were built. There is no question about it. This is not guesswork. This is not theory. We found the skeletons in the ancient graves. We found sculptures, which you'll never see when you go to Egypt. They don't put those things on display. But now we have the hard proof. And I'll deal with that later when we come to deal with the Egyptian section of this lecture. But I appeared before the Congressional Committee and I presented 12 witnesses, all European. Because they're going to say I'm Afrocentric if I show them this African said this. No, no, no. I'm going to take the very people that you think you will listen to. Columbus is the first person. I said, that's how I began. I'm not the first person to suggest there were Africans in America before Columbus. Christopher Columbus is the first person to say that. He actually says in the Journal of the Second Voyage that when he was in Haiti, Native Americans came to them and told them that black-skinned people had come from the south and southeast trading in gold-tipped metal spears. Columbus may or may not have believed, but he actually collected samples of these spears. They were sent back to Spain. They were meticulously, microscopically examined in Spain. And they were found to be identical, not just similar, identical with spears being forged in African Guinea. Of 32 parts, 18 were of gold, 6 of silver, and 8 of copper. Not only were they identical metallurgically, the words the Africans were using for these spears were the words the Americans were using. African word for gold, Ghana. That's why it's called Ghana. Gold Empire, the Golden Empire. And I checked it out in several African languages. Sarakole, Soninke, Gadzago, it's Kane. Vayan Mende, Kani. Kisi, it's Kani. Kono, it's Kanin. Fuel, it's Kane. That's the word for gold. And that's the word the Americans are using. And they have their own bloody gold word. Why are they using this strange word? And presenting material which when checked out, when the metallurgists checked it out in Europe, they found the spears were identical in their ratio of gold, silver, and copper alloys. How could you have linguistic and metallurgical identities like that? It is utterly impossible. Not only that, I then went beyond that. I not just showed Columbus. Ferdinand wrote a book about his father, and he said, my father told me that he saw Negroes north of Honduras. Columbus knew what a so-called Negro looks like. He was in Africa. That's how my book began. Columbus sitting at a table in Africa, arguing with the Portuguese. I tracked this man down. It is possible when you become very famous, people could track every little thing. Who you slept with, who you tried to kill, who slept with your wife or your husband, everything. And one found a hell of a lot of stuff on this clown, or rather this villain. He did some horrible things. He's known as the great discoverer. Ferdinand said, my father told me he saw Negroes north of Honduras. He not only heard of them in Haiti, he actually saw them north of Honduras. Vasco Nunez de Balboa, on September the 25th in the year 1513, I've got it down to the day. He's coming down the surface of Guaracu and Darien, which we now call Panama. And he and his men saw two tall black men among the Native Americans. They are startled. They haven't brought no black people there. Several of them commented it. Peter Martyr said they must have been shipwrecked. Then he also said they were Ethiopians. Well, Ethiopians, the word Ethiopian is not used for people of Ethiopia. The reason why Ethiopia gets that name, Ethiop means burnt skin. People of burnt skin would generally call them Ethiopian. So it's not referring to Ethiopia. Peter Martyr said they must have been shipwrecks. Lopez de Gamara said these blacks Balboa saw in the Indies were identical with the blacks we saw in Guinea. Rodrigo de Colmenares saw blacks. Captain of Balboa saw blacks east of the Gulf of San Miguel. Alphonse de Catafalque reported in his book, Study of Panama. L'Abbé Brasseur de Bourbourg was the guy who went to Panama, said there were two distinct people in Panama. The Mandinga, black skin, and the Tule, red skin. The red skin would be the Native American. And Alphonse de Catafalque presents us with a map showing blacks in various places in early America. The Charus of Brazil, the Jamasi of Florida, and the black Caribs of St. Vincent, pre-Columbian. Alonso Ponce cites them off Campeche in Mexico. River Palacio cites them off Tegucigalpa in the Nicaraguan Honduran border. Ramon Pane speaks of them as the black gold traders. Fray Gregorio Garcia cites them off Cartagena, Colombia. A dozen Europeans, Christopher Columbus, Ferdinand Columbus, Vasco Nunez de Balboa, Peter Martyr, Lopez de Gamara, Rodrigo de Colmenares, Alphonse de Catafalque, L'Abbé Brasseur de Bourbourg, Alonso Ponce, River Palacio, Ramon Pane, Fray Gregorio Garcia, seeing things that are not there. Probably blacks are haunting their dreams. It's absurd. You cannot have 12 eyewitnesses to an event that never happened. And I have not just 12 eyewitnesses. That is just one piece of evidence. I have 12 pieces. So it's not just the eyewitnesses, there's the metallurgical evidence. That it was tested. They were found to be identical in the ratio of gold, silver, and copper alloys as spares being forged in African Guinea. 18 parts gold, 6 silver, 8 copper. How could you have identities like that? Then there's the linguistic identities, which I just mentioned. Saracolis, Aninke, Gadzago, Vai, Mende, Kisikono, Pule went through half a dozen African languages to check out the word. And they're using the same bloody word that the Americans are using. How is that possible? If it was a European, you only need one piece of evidence. I'm giving you 7. How could you deny that? And it doesn't stop there. There is the botanical evidence. Take the banana. We use the word banana for the banana, but that's not the African word for the banana. The word for the banana is bakoko in Africa. Banana is an Arab word. The Africans didn't have bananas. The bananas were introduced into Africa by the Arabs very early, and they have a different word for it. Banana. They do not have banana. They have bakoko. I have checked the bakoko word because they found bananas in Peru. Peru didn't have bananas. Pre-Columbian Peru was not supposed to have, they didn't have original bananas. The banana, the reason why we found the banana is because when they buried their dead, they would have ceremonies every year, the year of the day of the death, and they would put fruit in the grave, and among the fruit they put in the grave was the banana. And they do not originally have bananas. That has been checked out. It's only found in these graves. If they were eating the banana, we'd find other kind of evidence. And the word for the banana in Peru is the same as the word for the Africans have. We call it banana, but the Africans call it bakoko. So I started checking out the words in Peru. How did this banana appear? They don't have bananas at that time in South America. And found in Galibi it's bakuku, in Oyapock it's bako, in Oyampi it's these are all South American languages. In Oyampi, it's Bako Me, and Tupi is Bako Ba, because pa and pa are interchangeable plosives. In Apiacus, it's Bako Wa. In Puri, it's Baho. So you have Bako Ko, Bako Ku, Bako, Bako Me, Bako Ba, Bako Ba, Baho. Can't happen unless you have a connection, a very early connection. And then comes the oceanographic evidence, because most people say, here is Africa and here is America. How could the Africans cross? They only have canoes that Tarzan can turn over in the movies. Well, that's another myth again. First of all, there are two things here that they did not take into account. I lived on a river. My father was superintendent of road and river transport over an area that was as large as Scotland and Wales. I grew up in the river. And my mother and father were divorced. That was the first divorce in our country, recorded divorce in our country. They later remarried. That was the first recorded remarriage in our country. I wouldn't advise you to do it. It doesn't work. But anyway, they did it in order to save the children, and I am grateful to them, but they suffered. But anyway, to come back, you have this knowledge. I had this knowledge of currents because I used to swim 3.5 miles across the water to the air base. That was a big thing to show how you are. You know, boys are like that. They're always playing the ass, trying to prove they're strong. Several of us drowned. So you could see what I mean by playing the fool. Anyway, I used to swim across the river, so I was extremely strong. And I knew about currents, because most people think the river is just like that. No, the river is alive. In certain parts of the falls in Guyana, the water is running as fast as a motor car. You don't have to have an engine, you have to know how to steer. Or it hits you against the rock and you're blown to pieces. The water moves as fast as a motor car. And in those waters, they do not move as fast as a motor car, the great rivers, but they move with force and take you places. And we have discovered 3 currents of Africa that take you automatically to America. There's one up the Cape Verde, one up the Senegambia coast, one up the southern coast of Africa. Once you are caught in those currents, you have to come to America unless the fish get you first. Whether you have an engine or not, the water is the engine. It's very powerful. And it's exactly where those currents end that we find the African presence. It goes to Mexico. It goes into other parts of America. It goes to Brazil. They've recently found, listen to this, look at the lies involved here. They recently found an African Negro woman. I say Negro because not all blacks are Negro. The African has 6 faces. For example, if you're in a dry African climate, you have a narrow nose. If you're in a wet or moist African climate, you have a broad nose. Most people don't know that. They don't know they have 6 types of African. There's the Nilotic type. They're all black. But they have the Nilotic type, the so-called true Negro type, all sorts of types they have. And I have in my new book the faces of the various types. And all of these types appear. But what is most extraordinary is the evidence we have of their ships. They had the ships. Thor Heyerdahl became world famous because he got the Baduma people on Lake Chad to build a boat that the Africans built before Christ. Thor Heyerdahl used the boat the Africans built before Christ. They showed him the model. They built the boat. He financed it. A boat they were using before Christ, and it crossed the Atlantic successfully. Heyerdahl told me, Van Sertima, we did not even have to fish. The fish jumped on board. Because in those currents are millions of fish. Millions! And it wasn't just Heyerdahl. Alain Bombard also tested African boats. And And they made it in less time than Vespucci. You have several, if you study the work I have done in the new book, Early America Revisited, you see these guys made it in less time than the European boats because of their knowledge of the currents. And they're not only currents off the Cape Verde, off the Senegambia coast, off the southern coast of Africa that take you to America. They're currents that spin you back towards Africa. We have an evidence of a boat, American boat, Native Americans landing in Africa 62 BC. There were 7 in the boat because it was an accident. They were taken to because the currents that not only take you there and pull you back. We don't have any evidence of Europeans doing that. We have it in Native American 62 BC. That is in my book, They Came Before Columbus. And apart from this oceanographic evidence, there's the navigational evidence. That's the boats. The Africans had the boats. The Africans built the boat for Heyerdahl. Heyerdahl became world famous about how he crossed the Atlantic. He didn't build the boat. It was Africans who built the boat for him. A boat they had used before Christ, the Buduma people on Lake Chad. It's in my new book, Early America. You'll see the boat. The Africans built it. They could easily have crossed. And when you cross, the current actually takes you into the Caribbean, to Brazil, or parts of South America, to Mexico, etc. Recently, listen to this, look at the cheating going on, look at the profound dishonesty of scientists. They found a Negro woman in Brazil, where the currents come from Africa, the Caribbean, Brazil, etc. They found a Negro woman in Brazil, 12,500 years old. That is even before the Native Americans. Now, Negroes always came from Africa, but it was so embarrassing that they suggested, yes, it's a Negro, but it came from Asia. Now, this is Brazil, you know. Brazil is on the Atlantic coast. To come from Asia, you have to get a boat that's going to take you all the way to South America, and then you have no car. Currents may take you, help you to get to South America, but then you have to walk to Brazil. Then you get the tip, you have to walk all the way to Brazil to drop your skull. And the New York Times ran the story like that, you know, thinking, and they even changed the name. When they found this Negroid woman, they call her Louisa, because the first human we found on earth is Lucy, an African. So they call her Louisa. But when it got to the New York Times, they call her Valherbe or Malherbe or something like that. And she comes from Asia. Niggers don't come from Africa anymore. They come from Asia. You find them in the wrong time, in the wrong place. Jesus Christ. I mean, how far can you take this nonsense? It is absurd. And you find also skeletal evidence. Listen to this, because I have to be very careful here. I was in 2 intelligence services in the world, the Guyana Intelligence Service and the British Intelligence Service, and you're not supposed to tell secrets. So I have to say this in a way that shows that I don't know nothing. Okay. They found 2 African skeletons in United States Virgin Islands at Hull Bay, St. Thomas. These skeletons were found in a strata or layer of earth which is datable 1250 AD, 2.5 centuries before Columbus. But they could not date the bones. Something strange had entered the bones of these skeletons. Now, I know why something strange had happened, why something strange had entered, because of something that was done in that area, and I'm not allowed to talk about it. All I could say is not far from Cuba, and Cuba was giving us some trouble, and we had to tell Castro, come on, we're the world power, so don't play the fool with us. We'll teach you a lesson. That's all I'm allowed to say. But I went down to the Virgin Islands when I heard about these skeletons. And they promised, I shamed Vesalius, the archaeologist of the island. I spoke to the whole university, a big crowd, shamed him. He said he'd allow me to see the skeletons. Come there by 12 o'clock the next day. I arrived 10 to 12. Raced across the island. Arrived at 10 to 12. The door was locked. Well, I am a very nice person. But when I get angry, I'm not very nice. So I ran at the door. Wham! Shook the place. The police came on. What are you doing here, sir? I was invited here. You know the place, don't you see the place is closed? Yes, sir, but it's very strange that it should be closed. I was invited here, I was to come here by to move along, sir, or we have to arrest you. Well, I moved along. But fortunately for me, friends on the island who'd heard of my interest and I'd spoken to the university there, they took me to a rock pool at St. John. That was St. Thomas where they found the skeletons. They took me to a rock pool at St. John's in the Virgin Islands. And they wanted to show me carvings of tropical animals. When I saw these carvings, I said, no, that is not evidence. Those tropical animals are in both places, both Africa and America. But as I was preparing to leave, the light of the sun shone on the rock, just above the rock pool. And I looked down and I saw a strange formation, dots and crescents. And I said, nature cannot do that. Nature cannot do that. It's because it will wash against the rock and it may cause a kind of cleavage in the rock, but it can't make perfect curves and dots and curves. It cannot do that. So I went down there and I cleaned the rock and I photographed it. I sent it to various parts of the world. I sent it to Africa. So someone in Africa, in Ghana, said it's the Gainame sign, and I said, send me evidence of the Gainame sign, and he sent it to me, and I said, no, don't waste my time, man, that doesn't look anything like the Gainame sign. But I kept taking it wrong, and eventually Dr. Barry Fell of Harvard, he's dead now, he'd written America BC. The New York Times ran 3 pages attacking me and Fell. I brought out, they came before Columbus, Barry Fell brought out America BC. He was dealing with other kinds of contacts. I was dealing with African contact, and New York Times ran 3 pages attacking me and Fell.
I'll say this is a mind-blowing black history that most of us don't even know. I mean, we are not told this. It is so sad that I had to look this on YouTube so that I can find, and I came to realize that there is so many important information on YouTube that is not even shared out, that it's not even taught on the syllabus. So for example, if we say Columbus discovered a place, or Columbus was one of the earliest people to discover things in Africa or outside Africa or in US, Africans were already there. So tell me what they discovered. For instance, we having explorers who came to Africa and they say that, oh, they discovered Lake Victoria. No, they found Lake Victoria with Africans there. You know, it is the same narrative. So Africans were already even in the US, even before the Red Indians, or the people that they refer to as the true indigenous of Africa. Same narrative with Egypt. Who are the true indigenous people of Egypt? It is Africans, you know. When you are taught the African civilization, these are one of the things that we should be taught. But even if you Google it up, it won't give you the message. It will just tell you the normal thing that you're being told, you know. And Columbus himself says that his father told him that in the group of where they claim that the origin of the people who discovered the United States, or people who were there in the United States before, were the Red Indians. In a group of them, we had 2 tall Africans, which also the professor continues by explaining that later on they were found, if not them, but some Africans who were also found in the America, in the earliest places, were found dead. And he tried to expose the reason to the people, you know. So for me, I feel like these are things that we always need to talk about. And the professor provides 7 credible evidences that proves that Africans are the true are the people, or the indigenous people who also discovered the United States. So go with the narrative of I don't know who discovered USA, I don't know who discovered nothing, you know. Same narrative that explorers also came within Africa. I don't know, John Lakey discovered what, I don't know, so and so discovered what. The first people were already there were Africans. And we add the names of the rivers, they came and twisted them, and they named Lake Victoria, I don't know, Queen Victoria or somebody that they used to name the Lake Victoria. Africans already add our own names of the lake, so like there's nothing new that they discovered for us, and the same narrative that they're trying to use, and they are trying to defend this narrative that it is not Africans who discovered these things. They are trying to hinder this information, and that also explains as to why our artifacts are being taken from here and then taken to the United States or taken to the western part of the world, because they know that if we have our own artifacts with us, we will know the truth. And when we know the truth, that's one of the most powerful things. And these artifacts are so important to Africans. It is so important to Africans because it contains the details, it contains the information which Africans can use to know their history. 80% of Africans doesn't know their history. It is only 20% of Africans who knows their history. And even in the 20% of Africans who know their history, they don't know the truth. They only know the general things which were written by people who want you to hear what they want you to hear. They don't want you to hear the truth. They don't want you to know the truth. So I feel so sad at the same time, knowing that most of our people, we are so reluctant in our understanding our African history, in understanding the contributions, the African civilization, the contribution that Africans have played in the world. There are so much things that Africans have played in the world that it's not even being showed. The histories have been hidden for Africans. And that's, as I've said, that's why they don't want you to interact with your artifacts. Because these are also the fossils that shows that dates back the days when Africans are the true indigenous of the people, and that explains to you as to why Africans were the first people in the world. They were spread different places: US, India, Egypt. All these places were occupied by Africans. Africans were there before. These places were occupied by Africans. You believe it or not, but that's the truth. Africans were already there. There is no more new discoveries that was discovered outside Africa. Africans, we were already there. If a person discovered some medicine about something, if a person discovered something about something, Africans were already there, and we already knew this. We had our own ways of treating ourselves. Like, it wasn't like it is something new. And even if we say that the colonizers introduced, they came with religion. Remember, Africans, we already had our religion. We were praying to our God. We were praying to our ancestors. We had our own ways of praying to our ancestors. Do you know that we came to lose it? When now the Western religion came. We stopped praying to our ancestors. We stopped communicating to our ancestors. Remember, in the past, our grandmother could tell us that, I talked to your grandfather today through the dream, and he told me this, he gave me some information about this. But today you can't hear that, because you're told to go to the church and pray to the God, and that God has all the answers. But remember, I don't despise that God has all the answers for us, but we as Africans, we had our own spiritual ways of talking to our ancestors who could tell us the impending dangers. And that was one form of our religion as Africans. That was one form of us communicating. That was one form. Even communication. We Africans, today we're using new ways of communication, of course, which is so fast, that's good, which is so reliable, that's good. But remember, also in the past, we had our own ways of communication. Like, there's nothing new. People talk through smokes, horns, evaluations. These are ways in which Africans communicated. So like there is no new discovery that these people discovered outside Africans. We had already discovered these things. Trust me when I say this. You know? And the most sad part of it is that Africans themselves don't know this. Africans today, some of Africans today don't even take their time to read their history. People are just focused on doing TikTok. People are just focused on doing superficial things. I know something which is important to you might not be important to me, but at least understanding your history, understanding who you are, that concept only, it's important for you. It's important for you to understand who you are. Most of Africans don't understand the potential that they have because they don't have time to go and look up their history, try to find out the hidden truths about their history, things which are hidden from them. Most of Africans don't even know, I'm sad to say this, but I have to say it, most of Africans don't even know their potential against other races that they have, that other races don't have, you know. So if you're an African or a person with an African descent watching this video, please let your children see this video. Back in the US, I'm talking about the teens, waking up, going to the basketball, going to skating. Tell your child to take some time to understand the African history if you recognize yourself as having an African origin, because that's their true identity. Telling a person with an African descent, whether he's an African American, whether he's a native African, they need to be told the truth. You know, they need to be told the truth, and that's what I'm talking about.